One of the most important concepts to understand in the common law system is the Doctrine of Precedent. So this doctrine is what governs that core area of law, the law made by the courts or case law. And we'll remember that case law actually predates statute and is where the common law started. The Doctrine of Precedent, sometimes called stare decisis in Latin, is really just saying that courts are obliged to follow the decisions of other courts higher within the same hierarchy. So where we've got a similar kind of situation facing a court that has already been decided at a higher court, the lower court must follow what that court said. That, of course, is one of the reasons why understanding the hierarchy of courts is so important, because the Doctrine of Precedent only really applies to those decisions that are made by a court higher in the hierarchy that we're actually dealing with. As a result of this rule, this Doctrine of Precedent, what we get is a consistency in the law and a fairness, and in the sense that all of the same kinds of fact situations lead to the same result. And they're two of the key attributes of ideal law that you might remember we were discussing a week or so ago. So what this means is we're trying to get a consistency where similar situations and similar problems lead to a just outcome in the sense that everyone gets treated the same way. So here's a simple example, and it actually is one of the rules of contract. It's something that's called consideration. Consideration is what you pay or what you forego or what you're giving as your part of the bargain. So imagine that we've got two people, Johnny and Kate. And Kate's lawyer is arguing that she doesn't have to repay the money that she supposedly owes to Johnny because Johnny has verbally promised to forgive the debt. So just say Kate did owe Johnny $100. Yep. So Kate owes Johnny $100, and then Johnny says, "Oh, don't worry about it." And the question is, should Kate pay? Okay. So the question of law here is a promise to waive a debt. Waive as in forgive. So is Johnny's promise here legally enforceable if nothing was given in return? So there's no legislation on this particular question, and a judge is actually going to have to come up with an answer themselves. So to come up with their answer, they turn to what other judges have said previously. Okay. In particular, they're really interested in what other judges have said within the hierarchy that they're in. Because if other judges have made a ruling, they're bound to follow it. So any decision by an earlier judge is called a precedent. Okay? And that's why it's, funnily enough, called the Doctrine of Precedent. It only happens in superior courts or the intermediate courts, which are the higher level courts, right? Because if you're at the same level of a court, you're not bound to follow. So it's only, for instance, in the High Court or in the Supreme Court that we find, the District Court that we find has these powers to make binding precedent. Okay, so the binding precedent is the decisions made by judges in higher courts within the same hierarchy on the same facts. If we're outside our particular hierarchy, they're not binding, but they would be considered persuasive. So the judges are still going to look at those, and they're going to need a good reason not to follow that. So if we turn back to our particular problem here, what we actually know is there has been a precedent set, and it says, you know, in this particular instance, Kate has given nothing for that promise, and so it's not legally enforceable. So because a previous judge has made that decision in a higher court, it means that in this particular case, the promise to forgive the debt is not enforceable because no consideration has been given. And the reason that that's the law is because a judge has set it at a higher court for this particular decision. So that's the essence of the doctrine of precedent. The doctrine of precedent is what governs how case law comes about and is applied in the Australian system, and it's really integral to understanding how our law develops, evolves, and how we can have some sense of certainty in how things will be decided. Note also, because the highest level courts aren't bound by the decision in other decisions at their same level, right? They're not bound at the same level. It also introduces a flexibility. If society changes or if a judge got something wrong, courts at the same level can actually change the law and the logic behind that decision, which introduces some flexibility. In reality, they're going to very rarely do this, but it still is possible and introduces that flexible notion for an ideal law.